Are we live? I think we're live. Let me just double check that we're live. We are live on YouTube. Hello, everyone. Hi there. Hi, Spring fans. Welcome to the yet another installment of Test Containers Live, where we recap and talk about the technologies or in the test containers and Java ecosystem. I'm extremely happy. I'm extremely happy to introduce our today guest, who is the one and only, the developer advocate on the Spring team, the omnipresent, the ever young and energetic, absolutely the best educator, developer advocate, developer, and I hope my personal friend, Josh Long. Hi, Josh. How are you?
Hi, you got the last part right. Everything else was nonsense, but I appreciate it. I'm happy to see you. Like good times. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If we talk about the larger JVM ecosystem, then I think it would be dishonest if we not mention or talk about Spring, right? It's not even an elephant in the room. It's a de facto standard for very many things and many years. Which is I personally believe in, like, there is, people can have different opinions, right, on the utility of different roles, but I believe that there's a lot of your effort put into making Spring what it is today, because
I know. Can you imagine how much better it would be if I hadn't been there, though? That's the question that vexes me. Like, let's say there is a lot of me in there. I can only have set it back. That's my conclusion.
Yeah, ever so humble, Josh. People who are watching this right now in chat, you can type how much you love Josh right in chat. If you're watching this as a recording, you probably cannot do that, but you can find Josh on Twitter. He goes by @StarbucksMan, and you can express your gratitude for everything that Josh has done before.
I got a feeling it's going to be the opposite.
So he stops being so humble. Right. So what I wanted to ask you first, and to start this conversation, what are you working on these days, Josh? So I know that you are, as a developer advocate, obviously you are very much on the bleeding edge, right? Like, if you think about this curve of the adoption, there are like the early adopters, there are the majority, the laggards, and people who still use Java 8, and so on. But you, by profession, right, you have to be at the bleeding edge. So tell me maybe a couple of words. What are you working on? What technologies in the JVM ecosystem make you excited and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, so yeah. Ooh, where to start? Of late, the Spring team is marching towards the Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3.0 releases here in 2022. And with that is just a lot of new stuff that's just kind of worth trying out before you get there. You want to make sure it works perfectly. So a lot of my work of late has been helping people adapt, for example, Spring Native and GraalVM, which will be a part of Spring Framework 6. I want to help them make that journey to native images. And then, of course, there's GraphQL, Spring GraphQL. That's a separate project that's very interesting to me, and I've been trying that out and working with that a lot. And I've been updating my book, the Reactive Spring book, and I have this whole section on data. And in that section on data, there's just this. I finally did it. I finally realized I can't just put I can't just rely on my CI environment having the right services to test this stuff, for the book. And so I needed some easier, cleaner way to make sure that test ran no matter where it ran, no matter who was running it, so long as there was a Docker container, a Docker daemon, or something that could run Docker images or OCI images. And so that's how I got to here, I think. It's just a newfound appreciation for what you're all doing.
Right. So you introduced test containers into your book about Spring, and after you wrote a few tests with test containers, you're never looking back, right?
I mean, I've had this. So to be fair, I've had this epiphany before. I love test containers, but it's just this time I finally got to a point where I could just trust that everybody who was reading was probably able to also run Docker images, right? And it's like not taking advantage of a feature in the language now. It's just, why wouldn't you? It just seems so obvious. So it's fair to expect. I expect people who run code today in 2022 to have a compiler, some sort of text editor, an IDE, or all the glorious Emacs, and I expect them to have the ability to run Docker images.
Yeah, very good.
Unreasonable? I don't think it is.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Before we get into test containers, and I know that you prepared a little demo there as well, but I think before we get to that, I would like to. You mentioned something, so there is a little segue.
Oh well, so I can show you the state of the art. That I can do. I don't know if that's a demo as much as just a refresher for those who've not been paying attention. Where did you go, buddy? Yeah, I disappeared for a minute. Now you've disappeared. What's the plan here, bud?
Yeah. We are testing a few things, clicking around. Okay. I think this is just an artifact, right? So no. So just talk to me about your technological stack and choices, right? I've seen you advocating quite a bit for using, for example, Java 17.
Yes. Don't talk to me unless you're using Java 17. That I take that for granted. There's no reason whatsoever not to be using Java 17. And if you say legacy, I might just puke. Yeah, it's not a real reason. That's the reason that you should upgrade, is to get away from legacy.
Right. Well, I agree that Java 17 as a language is a very interesting and useful choice, but yeah, mostly. So why do you use Java 17? Because it's just the new and current, right? Because it's the most convenient and has like cool idioms, like, I don't know, records from 16s or like performance reasons. Like what's your pick? How do you decide like what's the most important for you there?
So yeah, part of it is, of course, I just love the latest and greatest. Obviously, who doesn't love that? And I'm lucky. I don't work in real software anymore. I work as a developer advocate. So I'm out there I'm just hugging the new releases because I can. I don't have to worry about it. But also, I like the new version because it's faster. It's more operations ready. It's not just a nicer syntax for me as a developer. It's a better thing to put in your production environment, and that matters a lot. You want to improve the speed of your code just for free? Just upgrade to 17. You'll see an appreciable difference. I'm not being ridiculous. Dollars to donuts. Your apps will start up faster and they'll run better, right? And they'll have smaller memory and more stable memory utilization. And that's not even talking about native images or anything. Just upgrade to Java 17. The other reason I'm so big a fan is because, of course, the syntax is I mean, my goodness, you have multi-line strings. How long have you waited for that? You know, multi-line strings, records, smart switch expressions, smart auto type casting. You've got var. I mean, just all the things you've missed in Java 8 are here now. You know, almost all of them. And so it's just a really nice language. And then the most important reason is because it's the new reason. It's a new baseline. It is like if you upgrade to Spring Framework 6, the baseline is Java 17, right? And that's this year, 2022. So, come on, get on board. Java 8 is now more than it's less than half. Just judging by the number of versions in terms of quality, it's less than half the current release, right? Which is Java 17. So yeah. There's just no reason to be stuck there anymore. The Java team has done everything they can to make this jump as easy as possible. And if you were saying, oh well, it's too early, I can't make the jump, they just introduced modules, that was Java 9. That was a long time ago. The community has moved on. We've already made all the work. We've already done all the work and documented all the steps required to make that jump as easy as possible. If it can be done, it can be done now. And if it can't be done, then fix whatever you've got that's holding you back, because it's, that version is not going to be supported forever. There's no reason to be there.
Yep. So,
and I want to help, by the way. I'm on Twitter. Like I said, just send me a direct message. We'll help you.
Yeah, send Josh snippets of code, and he will reply with his consulting contract.
Well, no,
just kidding.
Yeah, sure.
But what I like in your explanation is this new versions of Java going forward, and this is sort of with most of the technologies. The newer they get, the better they become, right?
Sure.
But what is especially important in about the Java, I think, in my personal opinion, right, is that it's sort of, this 8 of DevOps, right? The activities that we do as a DevOps team where we plan, develop, build, test, and operate and monitor and profile and then get the metrics and whatnot. Like it kind of supports the better version of doing all of that. right? Yes. So it's better in production, it's better in operating, it's better in when you develop things against it, right? The API is more reliable and so on, right? So it is as a tool, it gets better. And what I find is very important, the developer experience of this whole thing gets better. Because that's how technologists consume and kind of sort of win the world, by having the superior developer experience. It's very hard to be the de facto standard even when you're really good, but developer experience kind of sort of lacking. So there is a number of choices. If you develop especially microservices, I think the leaner, faster, better runtimes are a very good way to go. Mm-hmm. And also, now the world has caught up with all the other things. So one of those activities in the 8 of DevOps is test. So let's come back to talk about testing of microservices, right? And things. How do you do that, Josh, currently? Well, what's the de facto, the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this gets into a whole thing, right? We get the whole discussion around the testing pyramid, and we get the discussion around unit testing versus integration test versus, I suppose component test goes lower than that, but so unit, component, integration, and then end-to-end tests, yeah? And so, JUnit is great, right? It's a great way to write tests. The question then is, at what level are you testing? What kind of feedback are you trying to get? What are you trying to validate? And for so much of what we're doing, it's easy to say, well, the unit test tells me everything. And if you look at discussions around the testing pyramid, it says, 80% should be that fast feedback unit test. But that's just not practical. I think a lot of times you're going to need a slightly higher level of test, and especially if it's fast, and there's no reason not to. So what people want, as often as not, is to be assured that their business logic integrates with whatever data store that they're talking to, whatever message queue, etc. And so the question is that integration tests? Well, yeah, technically, but can you do it in such a way that it feels fast and responsive, and it gives you the quick, fast feedback that you so crave when you use unit tests or component tests? And the answer today is, yeah, unequivocally, yes. It's not that hard to spin up a like-for-like environment against which to test your code. And so I think test containers is a big part of that. What I think has been kind of interesting is that there is actually a really nice integration for Spring Boot these days, assuming you're using JUnit 5, right? And maybe that works with JUnit 4. It probably does. But the recipe, there's I find this kind of interesting. That, speaking of dev experience, and one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be on the show is that so much of what you find when you Google, Spring Boot test containers, you find the old approach, using a application context initializer, like a static class. And so I just wanted to show people kind of the state of the art quickly, just so that we're on the same page. And I think we could build something. What do you think there? We could build a little JDBC example. What do you say? So I'm going to go back to start.spring.io. This is obviously my second favorite place on the internet. I'm going to use Java 17. Yes.
Excellent. Can you share your screen? There's a little button at the bottom of the screen saying share.
I've never used this before. Software. What is that? Okay, good. Thank you for that. So, okay, I'm going to go back to start.spring.io. Again, this is my second favorite place on the internet. My first favorite place, of course, is production. I'll build a new service. I'm going to call it JDBC. I'm going to use Java 17 because I make good life decisions. And then I'm going to bring in just the JDBC support, the JDBC API. And I'm going to bring in test container support. See, it's right there. It's right there. I don't have to, nothing special, nothing doing. Yeah. And I'm going to hit generate, and I'm going to open this up in my IDE. So UAO JDBC.zip. Open that up. Start downloading, successfully installed, resolving dependencies. Something's cooking. Okay, so JDBC application. So what do you think? What's a trivial example, right? I want to get this thing talking to a SQL data store. Let's see here. Well, the first thing
you need to start with a model.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's see. Record customer. And we want to say integer ID, string name. That's a Java 17 record. I'm going to decorate this field with an annotation at ID from Spring Data. And I'll say customer repository extends JDBC, or no, sorry, just code repository. Okay. I could use JPA here. JPA, for reasons that elude me, doesn't support record yet, so that's a bit of a bummer. Okay, so I've got my my basic repository. I think I just want to test that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that'd just be kind of interesting. So normally at this point, you'd have a schema. So you just go here, you go to your resources directory, and you create a schema, a new file here, schema.sql, create table, customer, ID, serial, primary key, name, varchar 255, not null. All right, so there's my basic schema. So now let's just make sure that basic arrangement works as advertised. Let's start it up and see what we get. So I'm missing a driver class and I'm missing a URL, and even if I had all those things, I still wouldn't see the SQL schema being created. So I need to make that always, and then I need a JDBC URL. So it's a spring.datasource.url, and it's JDBC Postgres localhost, and then BK. So for now, we're going to do this the hard way. I'm going to run an image on my local machine. Okay.
Right.
Good.
So now your application expects a Postgres being provided somehow, right?
Yeah.
So it will just like knock on that JDBC URL and expect a database there.
Yes. Docker RM. I guess this. Yeah. Goodbye. Good.
Right. You need to clean up the environment and you start a fresh Postgres.
And all that does is it runs Docker, right? This makes sense today, right? We don't need so we need Postgres, right? That's my little script, Docker run, blah, blah, blah. And everything has the password and username BK. So BK, right? So let's see here.
What does BK stand for?
I don't even remember. Beautiful Kotlin, maybe? No, probably something else. I don't know. Let's see here. Okay, so good. So there's my basic application. Again, does it work? Who knows? Let's find out. Let's run this. I'm expecting it just to not fail. Okay, so it has still failed. And that is probably because I don't have the Postgres driver, do I?
You don't.
Add that, copy and paste. When in doubt, copy. Okay.
That's actually, this is for people watching. If you just didn't catch what Josh did, this is the trick that he taught me just recently. If you want to add a dependency that's available in the starter, right, you can go to start.spring.io and start generating a new project, and then just copy the whole POM XML. Yeah. And instead of finding that particular 3 lines of XML code that you need to include.
Well, right, so you can update it, right? I can add something else.
That's a very nifty trick.
Command B on the Mac, add H2, control space to explore, and just copy, don't have to download and unzip and all that. Okay, so it looks like it's working. The basics are working. We can prove it by checking out Postgres. So I can say run PSQL. Thank you. Okay, there you go. So there's my schema. Yeah. So drop table customer just to make sure we're on the same page. So run that again. Nothing. Good. And voila.
Right.
So that's something, right? That's going to work in my local development environment. But I want to test it, and I want anybody who downloads the code to be able to test it, right? I know Sergey is always talking about that, git, clone, and run experience, which I love. I love just being able to take any arbitrary piece of code, git, clone it, and Maven clean install, or just install, I suppose, or maybe even package. People get upset when I do install for stuff that isn't mine. It's like, oh, I might need it later. Whatever. Anyway, Maven clean package there, or just Maven package or Maven clean install. You want to know it works. You just want to run it and see it work and do something. So the question is, how can you enable that experience for people? And if you have to set up if you have to have my little script, my little run-postgres.sh script, yeah, it's not going to be great, right? People aren't going to be happy with that. So let's suppose
we want to be able to clone things and run things immediately. Like that's exactly. the spirit. Like with the attention span maximum of like 2 or 3 tweets in a row. Like right? I can't process more than that.
Exactly. So, yeah, I've already moved on. I've forgotten what you said in the beginning of that last sentence.
Let's get to test containers, right? So how do you run tests? How do you run tests here?
Let's talk about that. So I'm going to write a test here. I want unique data. I don't have any data in my database, but I want some data, but I don't want that data to exist in my actual database, right? I want this to just be started up with the data that I need for my test and then to disappear. So this is an ideal use case for Docker, right? And so I've got test containers on the class path. I've got a version here. And then that gave me a dependency management section, a bill of materials, Maven BOM that allows me to stipulate what versions of test containers should be on the class path. I also added Postgres and I added test containers, and the Spring initializer, start.spring.io, perceived that I had both Postgres and test containers on the class path. And so therefore it gave me the test containers Postgres specific integration, right? In test containers, you've got this thing called a generic container. And if you wanted to, you could just use that all day long. But for common case sort of integrations like Postgres and Redis and Mongo and whatever, there are special types, there are subclasses that are useful. They have accessor methods that you can use to get interesting data out of the container. Like, for example, a JDBC URL to connect to it if you're using a JDBC data source, for example.
Yeah.
So all that is here, right, on the class path. Haven't done a thing to this myself. And now I want to use it, right? So I'll go to my little test here. Command-Shift-T to go to your tests in IntelliJ. First thing first, let's just write the test as we think it should work, right? So let's just write a test talking to my local data store before we use test container. So here, I want to inject the customer repository. And remember, every time you use field injection like this, a unit test dies, except if you're doing it in the unit test. There it's okay. That's the big qualified asterisk under my my famous assertion. Okay, so here we go. What do I want to do? Well, I want to just find all the records, and that gives me a iterable, and I want to assert that has next, right? Let's see. So iterator has next, assert, but no, not that one. I want the JUnit 5. Assertions. Be able to type in order for this to work. True. Okay. There should be some data. Okay, and then of course I'm going to need to insert that data. So let's say customer repository.save, new customer, null for the ID, and my buddy Oleg. Okay, so there's. Let's see, this current only. Whoops. Ta-da. Good. Yeah. So there you are, and of course this all becomes just that much cleaner. Okay, so I've got the data. I've got. I want to assert that there's one record, right? And actually, I suppose I could just do a find all, and I can assert that there's nothing, right?
Yeah.
Assert true, whatever. There should be no data, right? I just want to make sure I have a clean environment. Let's just try running this test. This should fail, right? Because we don't actually have a record in there. Let's see here. Customer already exists. Okay, so I've already got a problem here. I've got this thing. I should modify this. Create. Is it? I always get this confused. Is it if not exists? And does it go before table or after table?
I think it goes after table, but let's see. Maybe it's both.
Percent here, doesn't it? Fantastic. Okay, so there it's idempotent, but I'm doing all this kind of work to reconcile my test environment with my local thing, when really I just want a fresh reset environment every time. This shouldn't be a question. I shouldn't have to do this. Shouldn't have to have a qualified thing for each new run of the tests. Maybe within the same run of the same tests, across different unit tests, maybe I don't mind keeping the same thing around, but across each run, that's not great. So what can I do? Well, I can use test containers, right? I want to outsource or excise, not outsource. I want to excise this container, this connection, and just have something get spun up for the life of my test and then get destroyed afterwards. So I can use test containers, yeah. And so test containers, pretty easy, right? Just add the annotation there, and then you want to add a container, all right? And so, like I said earlier, you could actually have a container like this and static, or I guess it's just a generic container.
Yeah, let's do a bit of magic. Let me just interrupt you for a second. Let's do a magic trick that you can. So test containers provides you with an API to manage your Dockerized services. So you can have a generic container with any Docker image, or you can have a specific module like Postgres, and then you get it gives you an abstraction. You have a Postgres container, right, or Kafka container or something.
Right.
But there is also something called the support for JDBC URL, which is something as magical, and I think you will like it. You will like it very much. So
I will.
If you go and into your application properties.
Oh, okay. So I know what you're about to say. Wait, before we get to that, can I show them the hard way so they can kind of
you can
what it looks like a generic thing, and then we'll throw that away. No problem. So
okay.
I know. I see what you're doing. You're about to introduce the custom URL there, which makes perfect sense. So okay, first things first. The lowest level integration looks like this, right? So public generic container, blah blah blah, and then PSQL new generic container, and here you put in a
Docker image name.
So Docker image dot parse, and then I could put in whatever the Docker image here is. So I've already forgotten the name of the script. Cat Josh nv bin run. So come on, you got this. There you go. So it's called just Postgres latest. Yeah, that's not very secure, but whatever. So I could do this. This is oops, no, that's terrible. I could just do that, but that's very low level, and I don't have any idea of what needs to be sent into that container to make it valid. I haven't really cared for that. So instead, I could use, and more likely will use, the Postgres SQL container, right? So that's this PGSQL new Postgres SQL container, and here I can say Postgres, whatever 12. Okay, that's more useful. And now I've got this really convenient the setter methods. So I can say with username equals username, with password equals password, and with database name DB. Okay, so this is now I'm not using BK all the while. I'm manually instantiating it with this. The only problem with this is that I have to manually remember to synchronize my test contexts properties to point to these exact same strings. So wouldn't it be nice if I could just get that? Wouldn't it be nice if I had some way to override the default configuration just for the tests? And of course, you could do some trickery with having test properties that get loaded in a certain profile and all that kind of stuff. But there's actually a very nice mechanism in Spring Boot called dynamic property source. And so here, what you're doing is you're creating a static void method, and I'm going to configure test containers properties, and you get something called a dynamic property registry.
It's a registry for the properties.
Yeah, I mean
that are provided dynamically.
Right. So spring.datasource.url, and that's a JDBC URL. So I'm going to use this .psql. And I want this to be static, don't I? Static. I guess that makes sense. Okay. So not this. Whoa. Okay. Get JDBC URL. Fantastic. Yep. Oh, it's a lambda, isn't it? So there we are.
It is. You can do colons.
Yeah.
You can do p.
Why isn't it letting me? I can do method references. I get it, but I'm confused why it didn't offer me that. Okay, there we go. So there's that. Username, yeah. So spring.datasource.username is equal to get username and get password. So that's the far side better. Now I don't need any of that. I still need this business right here. I need the generic container, but it'll give me default values, and I can just arrive. I can, configure my application context to have those values when I'm using it, right? So now I've got a data source. Now it should be brand new. Is that true? So I guess I could stop the other one, and this should work. Is that what we think?
Yeah, I think so. You have the add container annotation, so it should maybe run it.
So let's see here.
You can also remove the add container annotation and then run it manually, but that's a more kind of.
We're not going backwards here, buddy. We gotta go forward. Okay, look at that. It's doing something.
Yeah, this is the output of the Docker Java. Test containers uses the Docker Java API, so it can do more than your Docker CLI kind of can do normally, at least, right? So
right.
And it creates a Postgres for you, and it sits between your integration test, between your application code and the Docker container, and it provides this integration so it can figure your test context, and then boom, it runs, and you have access to that Postgres instance.
Let's break the test.
Let's break the test. Yes. Never trust a test that you have never seen failing.
Yeah. So I just added an assertion to negative. There you go. So it failed the second time. If I restore it back to this, it'll succeed again. So okay, that's worked marvelously, right? I've just used test containers here to eliminate some of the risk. Now, obviously, there's something I haven't been telling the audience here, Oleg, and I feel like I should come clean. I feel like I should be forthright in what's happening here, Oleg. I'm using an M1. I'm using an Apple M1 laptop, and there are some issues with M1 and certain Docker images, aren't there?
They could be because not all images are supporting the ARM architecture yet, or
not
like
yet.
ever will be. So yeah. Sometimes you cannot run certain services in the Docker locally.
Behind the scenes, at some point earlier, you helped me set up something I just love called test containers. Can we talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this thing has made me so. I was working on that book I was talking to you about earlier, the Reactive Spring book, and I wanted to write tests for certain kinds of images, and I was having issues. I couldn't get it to reliably build on my M1, where it worked just fine on my old 2019 MacBook Pro with 64 gigs of RAM and i7, that very old, decrepit, slow, ancient thing. And so I was trying to figure out why it wouldn't work on my ARM machine, and it worked in my CI environment, but it worked in the Intel, it worked in my CI environment. It didn't work on my ARM machine, and I still don't know why. I'm not smart enough to plumb those particular depths. But you helped me set up this thing called, what is it called now? It's called. You should have like a little banner here where I don't have to about this thing. How do you it's called whatever. It's Test Containers Cloud. Is that?
It is Test Containers Cloud.
Exactly. Oh, good. Oh, thank goodness. I don't know. Okay, so it's called Test Containers Cloud, and it just kind of acts like a proxy, doesn't it? You send a request to it running on your local machine. It acts as a stand-in for a Docker container, I guess, and then behind the scenes, it's actually forwarding a request to a cloud somewhere. And so the containers themselves are spinning up, not in your local context in your local machine, but in another machine, and they're just as fast, right? At least in my experience on my admittedly good Wi-Fi and all that. So now I'm just running. Now I've got that running. I don't have to have Docker running on my local machine to run these images, right? So I'm just rerunning the same test now that I've got that running. First time it runs, it takes a split second, just like it does when you're running your local machine. But ta-da! So in this case, it worked in both. I'm using I goosed the demo here by using the Postgres instance, which we know to work on both local and remote. But sometimes it may not work, and I really love. I had trouble getting my MongoDB container working, if I'm honest. Maybe it's possible, maybe I don't know. But the fact that I could just start that plugin, start that little app on the background, and just have it work, oh, that's so good. That is so good. That's the reason I'm happy to be here. But then it's all these other nice utilities that you taught me about that make life even easier. So this is the sort of generic approach. You create a container, some sort of specialized container, perhaps, and you use these dynamic properties. But for certain kinds of URLs, for certain kinds of properties, what's the alternative? How can we make this even better?
Yeah, you can make it even better. So before we go there, if you can, check the link in the chat. I would like you to set up the login correctly. I think that would make a little bit
correctly.
Yeah. If you go to the test containers login
in this chat
thing,
no.
Yeah, there is some chat there.
There's a private chat that everybody can see now.
No, there is like a YouTube chat.
Oh, YouTube chat. Oh, well, I don't know.
No, it's right there. It's just there. Like, or just if you Google, let me just Google. Go to testcontainers.org.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you go to the in the search field, type logging. And there is a recommended logging configuration, which is a logback file that you can drop into your project.
This one.
Yeah. And then it will make those like a wall of text that we saw before. It will make it disappear.
Now, normally I would put that just in my test context, but as for reasons we'll see in a minute, This can actually just be useful in your root context as well. So I'll add that there.
Might. It might. It might. Okay. So if you rerun that, I think we will see a little bit nicer look. Look, you can see.
That is very nice.
You can see the Docker whale icons. Well, not Docker whale icons there in the log that signify that something happens in the Docker container, and this is a much better experience. So you can see the Docker checks things, and then it says my Postgres 12 has been started in 1.5 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you imagined that? Right. Oh, yeah. So this will remotely help us. Oh yeah, this is using Task Containers Cloud, right? So perfect. Yeah. So that's the whole point of that is that there's a dedicated like sort of a cloud environment for you that will spin up the Docker daemon, and then through this desktop application you can connect to that, and Task Containers Java library will determine that, and then kind of sort of proxy the requests and talk through that through it like a secure SSH channel with that Docker daemon there, and your communication happens, and you don't run anything locally.
And by the way, did you notice the second time I ran that with your logging, regardless of the logging, it ran much quicker the second time because there's already a container in Docker Cloud.
It caches the container, of course, then the same way like your local machine will cache the container, so you don't have to pull that all the time.
Much faster.
Right.
Much faster.
It's pretty excellent. Yeah. We are working hard on making this an edge deployment. So the clusters where this cloud is available are equally spread through the world. So even if you don't live in San Francisco, you should get the best user experience possible.
Right. Absolutely.
So let's try a very quick thing. Let's try to look at the application properties.
Okay, on it.
Let's do this magic JDBC URL, right? So currently we have the data source URL is JDBC Postgres and the normal JDBC URL. So what we can do now, since we have the test containers module on the class path, we can instruct this URL to be magical. So we add the TC, I think after JDBC. So it's JDBC : TC, and then Postgres. PostgreSQL / I think it's database name, so it just could be anything, right? Because it's the same configuration.
Yeah.
Right. I think this is it, right? Okay. So now we don't have to manage the container manually in our tests,
right?
And the test containers integration will see the JDBC URL. So if we can remove this, and we can remove the container declaration,
like that,
right? And then this Spring context will see that there is a special JDBC URL. It will talk to test containers. Test containers will create an instance for Postgres for us, and then wire this thing together just as it's supposed to, very seamlessly.
So this is actually, when you say, it's not actually Spring Boot, is it? I think this is just a JDBC driver that acts as a proxy, and it spins up test containers. Is that right or no?
Yes. This is the JDBC driver that is comes from test containers.
And behind the scenes, it delegates to an actual test containers instance somewhere, which is brilliant, right? That's what you want. It's less work, more results.
Yes. You also, if you want, you can, after PostgreSQL, you can specify the tag, like the version name. But I think you can do that actually.
Like that. This.
I think you can put like 12 or whatever there was there, right? Okay. 12, something like this. Yeah. Let's try this. I think this should work. And then if it doesn't, that's on me.
That's okay. You get your money back, everybody.
Yeah. You can see. Yeah. Did you see that?
I did.
Starting the new container, and now we don't actually, in our tests anywhere, right? We don't specify that we want a Postgres container or manage this lifecycle.
Right.
We just use this like a magical JDBC URL.
Right. And so I love that, because for the common cases, there are integrations like this. Like I suppose there's one for Mongo, there's one for Redis, whatever. There's also this Java API. So if you don't find a property that has a proxy arrangement like that, then you can probably use one of these subclasses, these containers. And if that doesn't work, you can still just use regular old container and just specify any arbitrary Docker image.
Yeah. And even more, you can use a series of containers. So sort of how you would do a Docker Compose. You can create a private network and connect different containers and make containers wait on other containers. There's a whole flexible API to do what you can do. and it's just perfect. So our helpful producer says that make the test fail because otherwise it doesn't count.
Right. Okay. So let's try this. Like
Yeah,
that.
let's try this.
I'll search something that should be true to be negative. There you go. Good hunch.
Good hunch. So it fails and it runs. And so in this case, you don't even have to have Docker in your machine locally.
Right.
Because you're currently using Test Containers Cloud.
Yep. Which is wonderful.
Yeah. It's not a true generic replacement for Docker, at least maybe currently. But if you're just running integration tests with test containers, that is a great alternative. So Absolutely. It's also, like, just to be honest, it's in private beta currently, so it's not generally available. But you can contact us. And we can see what we can do.
Is that just add container? Is that, what is that? At test containers or at Atomic Jar, or where do they find you?
Yeah, at Atomic Jar Inc. Or you can go to testcontainers.cloud and fill a very brief form saying that you would like to get access, and then we'll figure it out.
Awesome.
We will figure it out. Right. So now this is how you run your tests.
Yes.
Now the question is, wouldn't it be spectacular if with the same ease you would be able to run your local development in Nor?
It would. That is a vexing problem, isn't it? Because I'm so spoiled now in my tests. I just like to have that same git clone and run experience, even for the application proper. If the user has something, great, we'll use that. But if not, just have some defaults on standby so that you can just get a complete working app that just works. You can point it to a real thing if you want, but if it's not, if they haven't bothered to do that, then just give you something default. I think about like WordPress. Have you ever tried to install WordPress? It's there's a million things that you have to specify before you can even start it. And I just wouldn't it be nice if a working system just had that? Like, oh, it works, and now I can pick apart. Okay, I'm going to replace this with an actual instance somewhere in my cloud, and I'll replace that with this. But it just works out of the box. I want that so bad.
Yeah, and I think. So there is no currently ready out-of-the-box integration for this, but we did a little bit of brainstorming with Josh and Sergey from Atomic Jar, and we tried to see whether we can build together an integration between test containers and Spring Boot applications.
Right.
So. And what you see here is a prototype. It's a test containers auto services prototype. It's a prototype that will automatically spin up services. And you should really add a license to this repository since it's public. But we can do that later. Public. Doesn't matter.
It's Apache 2 licensed. Is that fair?
I am not a lawyer and I cannot advise whether this is fair or not, but you should add the license to that eventually. It's very simple. We'll do that later.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. But what we can do is let's do. I'll teach you how to do this now. We have a second. So you click Add File.
Okay, let's do it. Add file,
and then create new file, and then you do license MD, like in the name of the file.
Yeah. License.md. Good.
And then you choose license template. And
which
you
choose
the license template. Well, that's for you to say.
Well, it's not really. I mean, it's all three of us. I'm okay with Apache. What about you, Sergey?
I think Apache would be good. Test containers Java, I know, uses MIT, but I think Apache is absolutely fine.
Sergey, give me a thumbs up or down, man.
I think Sergey is busy.
Okay, well, I mean.
Or maybe not. I lost the window.
Oh. See,
yes, Apache for the win. Apache for the win. Apache license to the toe is great. Excellent.
Hooray. Okay.
And that's the license that we can do. Right.
Commit directly to the main branch.
Yes, we are living on Edge. Excellent. Oh, yeah. So now this is the open source project.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Right. People, that's how open source is made. Right. So, and you have this project also imported into your IDE.
Yeah, I do.
Let's look at the components there. Let's look at the components that we have there, and let's first look at the profile service JDBC. I think this is the
there we go.
The small application up there. You're
Profile
currently
service.
yeah, JDBC. This is the top module.
Oh yeah. Okay,
there.
here we go. Very good.
Just like it's a very simple application. You probably can recognize that. So if you just look at that, look, it's a Spring application, and it has a record of a profile and an interface of a profile repository, and the REST controller.
Yep, and the REST controller is almost immaterial at this point. It adds nothing to the demo that we didn't already have there.
Yes. So it's literally the same application that we just had, but in a different project, because we will rely on the other module there. Right. So now, if you look at normally, so we would run this application, and it will require us an instance of a database to be present, because we run this. If you look in the POM, we run this with Postgres. We run this with Postgres as we just saw, right? Yep. So one thing that we currently in this setup, what we do, the difference between the previous one is what we enabled the Spring Boot DevTools.
It's true.
This is a dependency there at the line 58 here at the bottom. And we also added this custom experimental dependency, which exists only, a product exists on your machine. Dependency to this Spring Boot DevTools auto services snapshot, which is the module that you saw below there. It consists currently of a few classes, and this is a little bit more complex than the Hello World code. But what this application does, so if you look at the Postgres property source thing, right, what it does, it integrates with test containers, right? And if the configuration for your database is missing, what it will do, it will inject itself into the lifecycle of your application. Currently, when using DevTools, because it's integration with DevTools. And if there is no configuration where to find your Postgres, right, your application is not configured with the JDBC URL, it will automatically spin up the Postgres container using test containers and provide the configuration back to your Spring context.
I think I found a bug, my friend. What is that business right there? That'll never, you'll always get the default value, which means it'll always work, but test containers .mongodb.postgres. So there's some bugs to be worked out.
Yeah, it's highly experimental. It's highly experimental. It's been said to me that there are some environments where this can work.
I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yes, and so it's the whole premise is very, very simple. Some time ago, like maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Sergey Yegorov, who is one of the maintainers of test containers and a brilliant engineer, and the one of the founders of the Atomic Jar company, and another one of my personal friends, wrote an article about local development with Spring Boot, DevTools, and test containers, where he would explain how one can use the application initializers and everything to wire together kind of similar concept, right? Where if there is no pre-configured instance of a database for you, the code will initialize one for you and provide that to your Spring application.
Yeah.
Now this currently, I don't know, that approach didn't see a lot of adoption for some reason in various ecosystems. But I think it's very, very healthy, and I think it's actually proven to be useful by some, right? So some people use something similar to that, and then it's working. I think Sergey used that on his Spring microservices, and so we have a word of mouth confirmation that this is useful. Now, this is the second installment of that code, of that sample project, where we actually integrate with the DevTools, which is a little bit more interesting concept, because the DevTools can do what it can do. It can it is a little bit separated from the lifecycle of your actual application, right? So when you run with dev services, what you can do, it kind of runs your lifecycle of your application, and then it can reload your application, but only reinitializing the actual Spring application. So if you hook in the precise, correct phases of the lifecycle, what you can do is you can spin up your containers, you can spin up your database, and then reload the application without actually changing the containers.
I like it. We should try it.
So we should try it. I think we should try it. So
Yeah.
how did you integrate this new experimental module into your application? You added the dependency in the POM XML. So that's it.
Yes. So I should do that. I should. I've got this
I think-
installed on my local machine. I just git clone and Maven clean install right before the show. So actually, I didn't have the latest version of the code. I know we're all three working on the code all the time, so there's movement. So I git clone, git pulled, whatever, Maven clean installed, and that's it. So then add
So
this
this
to
is
my build. That's our thing, and we want dev tools as well, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you want it to run on your application, not on this application that we had. Okay, that's
Is that okay?
yeah.
You
I
think
think
that'll
so.
be okay?
I think so. We've never done that, but let's do this.
So actually, I'm going to copy and paste that, and then I'll go back and copy and paste this. There you go. So now I've got Spring Boot dev tools, I've got test containers, I've got Postgres, I've got dev tools, I've got all that good stuff. I'm going to need a web container, though, aren't I? I'm going to need something that sticks around. Otherwise, what's the point of having the reload, right? So
yes, and also I think with yeah, and then you will need the controller, right? Yeah, you want to copy the controller. You want to copy the controller.
I want to create one quickly because it's a different domain, right? So customer REST controller.
Yeah.
And git mapping customers and collection of customer gets and private final customer repository. Okay, good. So there's this. Create the constructor. Return this dot blah blah blah. That find all. There you go. There's my basic. Oh, it's an interval, isn't it? So there we go. There's my basic API. Let's see if that works. Just start this up in the JDBC application itself. Okay, we tried it. It failed. What happened? Well, no class def found. Org test containers Postgres QL container. That's because my dependency is in the wrong scope, right? I've got it test scoped, but now I need it available for tests and my local thing. So comment that out.
You know what? I like while we're doing this and while this is broken, let's see how this would work without this reloading, without the support for the test containers.
Okay.
So you just what you have you need to run your database script again, right? Like with
this you're saying I shouldn't have test containers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if we just in the proper sense of demo, right? Let's run it locally without test containers, and then we'll add this dependency and see what difference it brings to our development process.
Sure. Okay. Well, the first problem is that I don't have a Docker image running. Let's see. Did that Postgres JDBC application? Oh, it didn't reflect the updated class path. Oh, we've only got 4 minutes.
Yes.
Oh dear. Okay, so restart.
Yeah, restart. Right.
It's too good. It's so good. It wants to help so badly.
It doesn't want to fail.
Fail, I command you.
What are you running tests by any case, or are you running the actual application?
Just the actual application, as far as I can tell. Yeah, it's what the. Oh, is it because I have that auto services thing on the class path, and that's transitively bringing in the dependency? No, I don't
could
actually.
It be, Could it be magical application properties?
That could be it too. Yes. So
because you have test containers. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so that should fail, right and proper.
Right, because now it will not find the database locally, right?
Right.
So,
and I have no Docker image running.
Yeah.
Locally.
So we expect it to fail now.
Yeah.
Yes, it fails because connection refused because there is no local Docker with the database. So you would need to spin up the container with the Docker, with the Postgres, and then configure your application to use that URL, right? So now instead, what we're going to do is instead of fiddling with those shell scripts to start Postgres, we're going to enable this dependency.
Right.
And I think we should just run. Do we need to? Yeah, we need to comment this out because their configuration needs to be absent because configuration will take precedence over this. And then we just not changing any apps. We're not changing anything and we just run it, right?
Well, but this means okay, let's run it. Let's see if it doesn't fail. We're not gonna be able to see any data though because
yes, because
let's see. Oh, I have to rebuild.
The model.
JDBC.
There's Could you rebuild the model? There's the Maven icon there.
Maven icon.
Yeah. There was on the screen. There was a little reload symbol, re-input symbol.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, and after that, it should work like. It should work.
Oh, I got okay. Maven reload. Okay, voila. There we go.
Yes.
So it detected that we've got Postgres test containers on the class path. It detected that we're trying to use it. It infers that we're trying to use Postgres because we have Postgres itself.
Yes.
And so it creates a container for us. Now, of course, this is a trivial example. So let me quickly write some data so that we have something to read. So I'll say application runner, run, turn args, and customer repository save, new customer, null Sergey. Okay.
Yeah.
Voilà. So take two.
You run this?
I ran it. Oh, I should have. Let's just prove that this works, and then we'll do DevTools. So localhost, customers, did not work. Why not?
Oh, you don't have the controller. Wait.
Where did the controller go, actually? Didn't I just write that?
Put it somewhere else.
What the?
Just print it out. No, let's look at the controller.
Yeah, okay.
We need to do the controller.
Sure. Okay, so for save, yeah. Let's see. Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. Now we'll see the thing saying that, oh yes, we are entering the date.
Restarted, got one record. And with DevTools, this gets even better, doesn't it? So
yeah,
DevTools are a nice feature where I can compile the code, and like you said earlier, Spring will restart the application context without restarting the JVM, right? So I'm going to save all these records, and I ran it, and I saw one record produced there. I'm now just going to compile it, so I can do build project, or better yet, recompile this one class. So Command Shift F9.
Yeah.
And there's the container, restarts, and there's all the results instantly, right? It
so
starts up in 0.3 seconds.
Yeah. So the thing here is to note is that the container lifecycle is decoupled from our application lifecycle because the container is managed by DevTools. So it starts once per JVM process, and you can do as many reloads as you want, and your container will be there. And if you rerun this application, you'll get a new instance of the container and then clean database running that. So, and with DevTools, the restart is literally, I don't know, like a few 100 milliseconds, maybe even faster.
And that's remote.
Oh yeah, this is also remote. So yeah. You have a powerful machine. I think I get a little bit slower numbers with my slower laptop. Right. So just to reiterate, this is what we saw. This is what we saw here. We saw an application that was depending on the database, and it didn't run because there was no database. And then we added these dependencies in this project from the auto services prototype. And without changing our application, it magically created, in the dev mode, it created the service of the database, and it connected, configured everything, and we could just use that, and we can use the dev mode to reload the changes in our app without losing the context in the database, and it was super mega fast. So
very fast.
This could be a new thing. So if you're watching us and if you express interest, ping me or Josh or leave a comment on the video or GitHub issues anywhere. If you would like to use this, if you would see the use case for something like this, and we'll see if we can make this a little bit less prototypey than just one class in a repository.
Yeah,
right.
And one thing that's also, just to spell out the obvious, hopefully it's obvious, you can have this as the default case, but then if you have like a production config or something, you can still have a profile, a Spring profile, where you activate the configuration that talks to like a real data source or whatever, or you can just do environment variables. So you can leave this as the default and then just do export Spring _data source _ URL and then override that and point that to your actual Postgres running somewhere, your production thing that you want to keep around forever. This is great. You've got a unified experience for everything, tests and app development now.
Yeah,
just amazing.
And it could make a local development very, very enjoyable in the spirit of great developer experience tools. Right. I think that was a superb demo. I thank you personally very much, and I think it was very, very great to have you here. I know you have to run, so thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very much. We don't have time for questions, so ping us online. Find Josh on Twitter. He goes by @StarbucksMan, and he'd be happy to chat with any and all of you.
Absolutely.
Right. See you next week. We have a session scheduled, so check out the YouTube channel and see you then. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.